So, welcome everybody to SEO for Coaches. This session is going to be a little bit of a whirlwind around the world of SEO. I'm hoping I'm not going to just go into some massive rant, but we'll see how we get on. I'm going to hopefully bust some myths, answer some questions, and explain to you how you can do some SEO without it being overwhelming or feeling like it's an endless list of to-dos. So, first of all, let's just start off with the big question of what is SEO? So SEO is search engine optimization. So back in the early doors days of the internet, we had a thing called Yahoo, and Yahoo was an index of pages. And there was a room of people that Yahoo hired to look at a web page and then go, oh, okay, I found Mark Stegman's website about podcasting, which doesn't exist yet. Oh, he's a future thinker, but I'm going to put him in this category called podcasting. Next website. And they manually indexed the websites. And that was the front page of the internet. It was Yahoo. So that's how search started. No, sorry, that's how you found stuff. You went to Yahoo and said, I'm interested in finance. What's the top 5 websites on finance? There are the 5 websites on finance. There probably were only 5 back in the day. When the 6th one came along, the people were like, oh, that's interesting. Where do I put that? Is it top 5 or not? Maybe it's going to replace number 2. That's how it worked. All of a sudden, there was a competition. So you relied on the rooms of hundreds of people, like milli librarians, physically and in real time ranking the internet. Google came along and said, what if we didn't have to manually look at the page? What if we could make a robot that would just tell you what it found when you asked what you wanted to find? So essentially, that's where the term search came from, because Google were allowing you to search the index rather than have to browse the index. And of course, Yahoo's index became tens of thousands, if not, well, tens of thousands of pages long, hundreds of thousands maybe. But of course, because Google could index automatically, they could do it really quick and really fast. So without getting into the nitty gritty of it, essentially the very first version of Google, which is well worth looking at a screen grab of, is absolutely hilarious. But basically you'd type in dogs and it would show you a website about dogs, or you'd type in finance. And, you know, the innocent people of the internet back then did genuinely just type in dogs, cats, bread, that kind of thing. Like some of the first Google searches are brilliant. So Google basically had to make up a way of working out what a website was about. And they created a robot to do this. And that robot is called a spider. So it's a spider bot. So it's a good bot. There are bad bots and there are good bots, but the spider crawls the web. There it is. Oh yeah. These 90s lads, they had it going on. So the spider crawls the web, and when it finds a website, it says, hey, Google, index, I found this website. I think, oh, my phone just said, how can I help? When I said, hey, Google. That shows you how far we've come, doesn't it? That's insane. So I need to bear that in mind for the rest of the session. It's just going to be going off all the time. So basically, Google had to come up with a way of indexing the sites. Now, basically, this robot started off being really basic, and it basically said, okay, I found a website over here, and it's about finance, and I found a website over here, and it's about dogs. These 2 websites are not related, so I don't need to make a link between them. However, this website over here has written an article about borrowing money to buy a dog, and they've linked to this website. So because there is a link, I'm going to register that link. So back in the day, you could cheat Google by just putting in loads of links. Because you could say, my website's all about dogs, and I'm just going to link to loads of other websites about dogs. And Google's spider robot wasn't very clever, so it couldn't work that out. Basically, it didn't take long for Google to work this out. And essentially, they then worked out that there was more to it than just the number of links you had. Basically, most SEO advice you will read on the internet doesn't go any further than that. They're still working in 2002, 2003 level utter nonsense. Since then, Google now knows absolutely everything about your website. So its spiders will go to your website, it reads it, it uses natural language processing to understand the tone, the intention, the content, and whether it thinks it's been written by a human or a robot, and whether that person wrote it in their native language or it's been translated. It then works out what it thinks the core theme of the text on that page is. It looks at the images. It uses Google image analysis to look at what's in the image to determine whether what is in the image is linked to the text on the page, and therefore whether it is within context. It then looks at all the links that you've made and works out whether they're spam links, whether you're just trying to trick it, or whether they're actually genuinely useful links to be made. So it does this on everything on your website, whether you ask it to or not. So if you then install Google Analytics on your website, you're then giving Google a backdoor access, because what you're saying is you're telling Google what people actually did on the site, so it can confirm whether it was right in its guess. So essentially, that's a kind of amazingly fast from where we started to where we are. But I hope what I've illustrated there is we started very basic and it was very easy to trick Google. We could make a link between borrowing money to buy a dog and dogs, and Google would think they were related, to essentially a computer program that is so complicated and so unbelievably complex that most people can't comprehend what it does or how it works. Even the engineers at Google don't know what the other engineers at Google are doing within the same algorithm. They have over 10,000 engineers working on just the Google search box, just to keep that box working. So if anybody says that they can show you how to trick the algorithm or trick Google or manipulate the results, it's total bullshit, because not even Google understand what is in the box that is Google. It's Schrodinger's cat, if you see what I mean. It's definitely in there, but is it in there? But we don't know. There's definitely people working on the code, but the code has become almost sentient, Skynet, if you will. So what happens when we do a search? What used to happen is you would type in your search and Google would go to the index and it would then work through its index of sites and go, okay, Risa has typed in that she wants to learn all about how to cook vegetarian sausages. That's what she's decided she wants to know about today. In my index, I reckon that is the most relevant page for Risa. So this is going to be results. So this is our search results. I'm going to put the number 1 result here. And then number 2, 3, 4, etc. And these results are just from the index. So what happened then is Google made a change and they said, hey, Risa, would you like to log in to Google? And most people click yes. So when you've logged into Google or you use Chrome, everything you've ever typed into Google is logged and recorded. So it may know that actually Risa's already been to this site and didn't like it. So that result is going to go down here for Risa because she doesn't like it. But if I do the same search, that may not be the case. So we're now in the age of personalized search results. So if you also use Chrome and or Google on your phone and you've been nice enough to log in, Google knows what you type in and look at on your phone, and it knows about it on your website, so it can contextualize where you are, what you're doing, what you're looking for. So again, essentially the point of all of this is not to try and baffle you with how it works, but purely to illustrate how complex the world of search is, and therefore what utter nonsense most of the advice is out there about how to trick or gain the rankings or up where you appear, because it's so complex. And even if you get it right, your result is different to my result. So for example, if I type in coaches marketing or marketing for coaches, Better, Bolder, Braver always comes up number 1. Because it's like, well, you go to that site every day. We know you love this website. You know, so as far as I'm concerned, we're doing really well. But if any of you do it, you might get, you know, some other less reputable company pop up the top. And you might have to scroll a little bit further down to reach us. I don't know, and there's no way of knowing. And until you do the search, Google can't tell you where it will be. So having said that, there are a number of factors that we need to get right in order that Google can understand what your page is. So what we've got to here is a point where I hope we understand that Google is incredibly complicated and you can't game it. But what we can do with SEO is help Google understand your site so that it can serve your website to the people who it thinks are the best match. So that's what we're going to go on to look at for the rest of the session, is what we can do on our websites, and it'll answer those questions that we put forward at the beginning. We'll get to all of those bits. So before I do that, has anybody got any questions about how that works? Yes, Mark.
I have to get the cat out of the way so that I can actually communicate. Hello. Am I at a disadvantage by not using Google Analytics because of what you've said?
No.
Thank you.
Good question, though.
Yeah, I use another analytics package, the one that's sort of a little bit more privacy sort of aware, which is why I'm asking.
Yes, and that is very good of you. The other thing I will say is that, sorry for the loud paper ripping there, Google is actually closing Google Analytics next July anyway, so it doesn't really matter.
Oh.
It's transitioning over to Google Analytics 4, which is no use to man nor beast. So it's so unbelievably complicated. Even we as a web agency aren't bothering to put it on our clients' websites because it doesn't make any sense. I'm going to be doing a blog all about different analytics choices, but I've got 12 months to write it. So
my plug is plausible.
Yes, very good. I also there's another one as well. And I've immediately forgotten the name of it. If you're watching anyway, there'll be a link under the video, so check it out.
Thank you, though.
Yes, very good question, though. Very good. Okay, so the first thing to think about is it used to be all about keywords. So, for example, if you do mobility, here we go. If you're all about mobility, then you just want to go, mobility is what we do. Mobility is what we live and dream about all day. Mobility is sometimes confused with, and people just keyword stuff. So essentially keywords don't really matter anymore because Google knows whether you've keyword stuffed, because it knows whether you've written it, whether you've tried to cheat it, and it knows whether it's been written by a robot. As I say, it can even tell whether it's been written by someone for whom it is their first language as well, which is mind-bogglingly accurate. So the key is to just write for humans, because Google loves content that's written for humans. It hates content that's written for robots because humans don't like reading content that's written for robots, so don't bother. So the thing to bear in mind with your search is contextual. So for example, if I'm on my laptop and I search for kitchen plumber, I'm probably looking for a plumber who can help me with installing a new kitchen. If I type in plumbers near me, I've probably got water coming through the roof. If I type in leaking tap, I'm probably looking for a plumber. So contextually, there are certain things you can type in on different devices in different places that will affect where the search you're doing. So one of the questions we had earlier was about search volume. So if you're doing something niche or you're doing something that isn't particularly often searched for, then that's okay, because you can just be the most relevant result for that term. So let's say you're doing podcast editing for life coaches, as an example. The number of people who search that are going to be really low. 5 or 10 a week. However, the 5 or 10 a week who do search, if they find a page all about that, are very likely to be your ideal client. So it's worth making a page for, just to catch every few people who turn up. If, however, we take a much more generic term, podcast editing, you're up against Adobe, you're up against Descript, Spotify, Apple. You're up against some of the biggest websites on the planet. You've got no chance. So there's no point. So in SEO land, that's called short tail and long tail. And it basically just means you've got your domain name, so domain.com, and then /, and if it's short, it's really hard, And if it's long, it's much easier. So long tail keywords are what to focus on. So without getting too technical again, what are long tail keywords? It is like a recent blog series I've just done on our website. How to advertise your coaching business. How to get coaching clients fast. How do I find my first coaching clients? How do I use ads to get more clients? All the questions we get asked, and I've just written an answer for them so that when people type that in, we're just the most relevant page that Google can find. So it's not about winning the most clicks, it's about winning the most relevant clicks. If I was doing this presentation for e-commerce customers, that advice would be exactly reversed because you just need numbers and throughput. But for consideration purchases like coaching, this is why a lot of marketing advice out there just doesn't work for coaches, because it's all made for generic stuff, water bottles, yoga mats, etc., where it's just throughput and numbers. So the long tail is what you want. And you know what those are already. They're the things you're writing blogs about, the things you're making content about. So how do we make sure that Google can find them? Well, there are a number of things we need to do. We need to make sure that the blog title is simply the question. So how do I find coaching clients? Do not call the blog a collection of thoughts about finding coaching clients on weekdays rather than weekends, to pick a silly example, because that's not the question. So big title, top of the page, the question that you are answering. Don't be clever, just go with it. And then you go on to answer the question as you will. If you can include an image that's relevant, do. But again, remember, Google is using its image analysis to look at the image to determine whether it's relevant. If it's not, it ignores it. It doesn't downrank it, but it just isn't of no relevance. But for example, if you've drawn a diagram that supports what you're saying, Google will be like, oh, that's probably really relevant because it's a diagram. So diagrams are good, infographics are good, because Google doesn't really understand the context. So it's just like, well, it's probably right, especially if it's got the words in it. So if you're talking about confidence and reliability, I don't know where you would be, but if you do, and you've got those two words in the image, Google will find those words, even if they're an image, and go like, oh, that's probably relevant. Whereas if you've just put in a picture of some balloons, it'll be like, well, that's of no relevance, so ignore that. So try and keep everything on the page relevant. And just to think about it from your user's point of view, the image might look nice, but is it adding anything? We don't need to know about images that aren't relevant. If you've got links to videos, add them in. If you've got links to your sources, add them in. Google loves all that because it contextualizes, it adds detail, and it helps it understand exactly what you are connecting that thought to. So your if you, depending on your website editor, it will either be called title or it will be called H1. But either of those things need to be the question. And when you do titles, don't select them and say bold. Make sure they're either subtitle or H2, H3, H4. The reason for that is Google does know the difference and it likes H's. H just stands for heading. So you want a big title or H1, and you want text, and then you want an H2, and then text, H2, and then text, and then maybe an image. So you don't worry too much about the structure of it, but just make sure you're being neat. And essentially bold and italics don't really matter in SEO. It's not important. Just make sure you're putting the titles in, because Google does love a good title. So yes, I think that might be everything about pages for now. Does anybody else have anything about page layout or page titles? And
what's the this is a really niche question, just because I really like using them in blogs, so maybe it's not relevant too much to anybody. Like Giphies or Jiffies, however you pronounce that word.
GIFs, yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Again, Google will understand where you got it from, what it is. It's not, I don't think it's going to detract anything. It's not going to lose you anything other than page load. which we're going to get onto, but it isn't going to add anything.
Okay.
So if you've got a film reference to a paragraph you've written, Google is not going to get that
Okay.
yet. It might do. Depends how clear it is. If you're writing about Groundhog Day and you put in a Groundhog Day GIF, great. But if you're writing about Monday mornings and you put in a Groundhog Day GIF, it'd be like, probably not that relevant. The other thing I would say is if you add an image, remember to add the alt text of what is in the image. Because if you are, basically, if you can't see the image, either if you're partially sighted or you have images turned off, then you need to know what's in the image. And Google also uses that to help it understand what's in the image. It gives its little magic tool a bit of a head start. So Google likes images which are alt text. The other thing is, and here's a little trick, so there will be a couple of tricks. Here we go. If you are a coach and your name is Mark Smith, let's go with Mark Smith, quite a common name, but Mark Smith coach, that's going to start to narrow it down. If Google can find an image of someone called Mark Smith coach, it will really help it find that web page. So when you upload your picture of you to your website, which 100% needs to be there, make sure it's called your name and then coach afterwards, .jpg or .png. Because that file name actually makes a surprising amount of difference, despite what Google says it doesn't. So rename, it really does. So if you type in my name, you find loads of images of me, because my name is slightly oddly spelt, so I'm cheating a little bit. But if you type in, I mean, you could type in Mark Smith coach and we'll find a Mark Smith who's called himself marksmithcoach.jpg. But the point being, it's an easy win. When you type in your, so for example, the Better, Bolder, Braver logo is a file on the server called Better, Bolder, Braver logo. Because if someone types it in, I want them to find the logo, because they're probably trying to promote us or trying to talk nicely about us. Very few people who slate people go and find the logo. So you want to make it easy for people to find stuff. So let's think, what else do we want to, so rankings, we could have a think about rankings, couldn't we? So when Google is trying to work out what website to serve, it's taking into account a number of factors. The primary one is how much time you actually spend reading web pages, and it knows your attention span, because Google knows literally everything about you. So it knows how long you spend reading pages. It knows whether the page that it's going to show you is too long for you to read. So it will just use that as a factor. Like when Mark clicks on this kind of link, he never reads to the bottom. So we're not going to show Mark long pages. We're just going to show Mark cat GIFs. Sorry, Mark. Whereas we may find that Tom, for example, the diligent Tom reads everything every single time. So the length of the article is irrelevant. Tom will always get the best articles because Tom reads all the pages. Google knows this. If Mark is queuing in the post office and is on his phone and has very limited data, a page that is slow to load will not be high up the Google search results, because Google knows that you've got 1 second to load the page before people will go back. So your website has to load in under 3 seconds. No ifs, no buts, no maybes. Has to be there in 3 seconds or people are gone. 1 second is generally what people will spend assessing whether they're in the right place. 3 seconds is, if it's not loaded, they're off. If your website doesn't load in under 3 seconds, you just need to upgrade your hosting. Again, if you're watching this on recording, I'll put a couple of links of nice places to go under the video. But essentially, speed is really, really important. And it's mobile attention span. Companies spend billions of pounds a year on making sure that stuff works fast. So Netflix, for example, spend billions of dollars on the first 10 seconds of every show being available immediately. So when you hit play on Netflix, it's playing. There's not, hang on, let me just go and dig up episode 9, series 5 of Friends for you. Wait there a minute. Doesn't happen. It's just dun, 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 it's just straight in the theme tune. No, it's just there, isn't it? So although you don't get the same volume as Netflix, people's expectations are the same. To most people, the internet is just the internet. They don't differentiate between your website and Amazon. They should both load as fast because they're both on the internet, right? So your page load speed is incredibly important. Now you can check this with, and this is unfortunately, there's no nice way of checking this. So apologies in advance. I'm going to put a thing in the chat there. The website is called GT Metrics. This is a developer level tool. Basically pop your website into that and hit analyze, and then we'll just sit here for a few minutes and it grades your website. You'll get a score between A and F, and it tells you your total load time, and it then loads the most baffling load of useless information on how to fix it. We're not going to look at that. It's just a nice way of getting a grading for your website. So it might be an eye opener. It might be a comforting, like, oh, that's nice to know. We're still making that happen. So there's Google. There's a Google version of this called Google Lighthouse, which is impossible to pass. No one ever gets 100%, by the way. So don't worry. Not even google.com passes Google Lighthouse. So don't worry about it. The key is the load time. So I'm just doing our site now because it's fun to say. So Gemma's got a B, excellent. We've got a B. Mark got a B. B is absolutely brilliant. That's great. Really good stuff there. Well done. Top marks. Another B. John Paul's got an A. Look at that, sailing through. Wendy doesn't have a website. Well, there, Wendy, you are the fastest website to load. But when you do get one, if you go with Create or Squarespace, for example, you will be loading super quick. You don't need to worry too much about it. So Better, Bolder, Braver scores a B, and its load time is 2.4 seconds. So the reason for that is because we've got loads of YouTube videos, and YouTube videos slow your site down so much. It becomes really slow. So if your site is loading really slowly, it's either because you've uploaded a massive image and it's taking up too much space, or it's because you're loading a load of videos. So below on GT Metrics, if you go to, they've made this so complicated, sorry. Yeah, there you go. If you scroll down, and it says page details, then it says fully loaded time. That's the time it takes to load absolutely everything. So our site is actually 6.6 seconds, but that's because it's loading 5 YouTube previews. So for example, we've got 2 megabytes of images, which is fine because we are loading lots of images on our homepage. It's not necessarily a problem. It's just if that is showing, like the worst one I ever got, I did one of these tests and the homepage image was 34 megabytes. Unbelievable. So the client said to us, do you reckon there's anything you can do? Yeah, give me 30 seconds, logged in, compressed the image, re-uploaded it. They got an A straight away. That's why you price on outcome, not on time. So, John Paul, question.
Not a question, but just how my website was really, really crap at loading. And the number one thing I did was turn off all the plugins that weren't doing something very useful. And that made a huge, huge difference. And it's so easy to do. Yeah. And you get caught up by that. It just adds up and adds up. But the other thing I did was instead of lots of pictures, had vector graphics. And it was unintentional because I made them really small so you could post them everywhere. And actually, because of that, it's helped everything else speed up. Yeah. So two easy things to fix.
Images are such an easy one. I completely agree. Thanks for sharing that. I think that's definitely one thing that is such an easy fix. If you're using something like Squarespace or Create.net or Wix, then it's doing a lot of the image compression for you. You don't need to worry because, of course, remember, it costs them money to send your images down the pipe. So they're saving themselves money. They don't care about you. They're just saving themselves some money. On WordPress, however, you're the boss. So you decide how big the images are. So it's very easy to get it wrong. So if anybody is staring at this screen and having a panic, being like, I've scored an E and everything's red and I don't know what to do, drop me a message and I'll have a quick look. But also we can potentially jump on a one-to-one session and I can actually help you fix some of this stuff because I've been fixing websites like this for almost 20 years. So we can probably get it all fixed. But if you're having a panic, even on record, if you're watching this in the distant future, just drop me a quick message. I'll have a look and let you know what the next steps could be. Francis.
Hello.
Hello.
I just did a GT metrics test on Optimistic Marketing, which is the website that I had put together in 3 seconds and was offering marketing for coaches from before you and I met, Simon. And I got an A and 97% performance. And I'm just curious because I obviously have not updated that website since the birth of Better, Bolder, Braver. But I can post it in the chat to illustrate that it's ridiculously simple. It's like
well,
3
that's
pages.
so fast because there's
and
nothing to
that
learn.
was my question. Yeah, is the less pages and the simpler you have it, the better, basically.
Yes, to a point, but there is a balance. So, for example, the best website is actually just text without any coding, without any installation. It's just an HTML file, which is like a text document that loads, and that would get you 100% because it's there. But of course, it's not very enjoyable to read. No one's going to be filled with joy looking at just plain text. So there is a trade-off between user interface design, interaction, functionality, creating something that inspires people and gets them excited and energized with images, videos, sounds, embedded podcasts, whatever, versus stripping it right back. When the web went through its sort of heyday of the .com bubble, everybody was loading the pages with stuff. And I don't know if you remember MySpace, but when you went to MySpace, music would play without you asking it to, and it was the most annoying thing ever. That was kind of that time when everyone was just like more. After the .com bubble, we went into sort of Web 2.0, they call it. And basically that was when everybody started stripping everything back. And I think it's what you were saying, Francis, is that thing of like less is more in that sense. And I really think that the less information you can use to get your point across, the better. For 2 reasons. 1, nobody reads long pages. 2, your bounce rate is an indicator of whether it's working. So let's just talk about bounce rate for a minute because it is important. So when you do a search, you get your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 like that, results come up. If I click on number 1 and I go out to the web page, and then I'm like, nah, not for me, and I go back, I've bounced. So I'm not sticking around. If, however, I go to a second page and a third page, then I stick around. I'm then a visitor. So when you look at your bounce rate, which you won't see on GT metrics, for that you'll need something like Google Analytics, Plausible, even WordPress stats can give you that. If you're using SiteGround, it's in the analytics section, but the phrase is always the same, and that's bounce rate. If your bounce rate is like 80%, that's high. That's a lot. The only exception being blog posts. And I'll get to that in a minute. If your homepage bounce rate is anything over 50%, it might be time to have a little look at the length of the page, what's on there. Can you say it in less? Can you move some of that information out to another page? Can you basically get to the point? is that's what the bounce rate is telling you, is like, get to the point quicker. One thing I would then say is, although we all love building our websites on our computers, and I would challenge anyone to build one on their mobile, most people will be looking at it on their phone. So are you asking people to conduct an Olympic level sprint to get to the bottom of your page because you're not getting to the point? So again, in your analytics package, you'll be able to see desktop versus mobile. What's the bounce rate for each? If your mobile bounce rate is through the roof, get to the point. Strip out some images, shorten those paragraphs, make those pages quicker and easier. Essentially, get people to talk to you rather than to read from you. That might help. Try it for a month, see if it makes any difference. If it doesn't, tweak it again. Your website isn't chiseled into stone. That's the joy of it. It's not like printing a brochure where it's 10 grand to go or 5 grand to go to print a brochure, and then you're lumped with boxes of the things that no one wants to read. You can just go in and edit it and change it. So that's cool. So the bounce rate means something because Google knows whether people come straight back. If lots of people bounce, this web page is going to go down because Google doesn't want people to bounce. Google wants people to find the most relevant information they can in response to their search. So you need to make sure that your website is delivering that. Now, we covered that in the long tail keywords. So if you've written a very specific blog, podcast editing for life coaches, if I type in podcast editing for life coaches and I get to that page, but sadly it's 5,000 words, it's way too long. People are like, I haven't got time to read a book on it. I just want to know, can Mark do it, yes or no? Then the bounce rate is telling us that. But it's not just telling us, it's also telling Google. So Google's going to then go, this page just isn't pulling its weight. I'm going to down rank it. The converse of that is true. If everybody who goes to your website is like, yes, they fill in the form at the button, they click the button, they go on to read a blog, they do something else, Google's like, brilliant, I've done my job. I've sent someone to a website, they've interacted with that content. It also works out the time they spend on the page. So, and that's why I say the exception to this ruling is blog posts. And that is because people will often go to a website, read one blog, and then go somewhere else. But as long as they spend the rough equivalent of the read time of the blog on the page, then Google thinks it's a success and the bounce rate is ignored. So if your blogs are getting 80, 90, even 100% bounce, don't worry, what's the time on the page? So I know that's a lot of factors, but remember this is being recorded, so you can come back to it. Feel free to, if you're watching on repeat, of course, you can pause it and have a look around. Ping me if you've got any questions about analytics stuff again, because we can always dive into a one-to-one if we need to, or I can just answer the question right there and there. So this brings us on to Gemma's other question, which was about rankings. So as we've established, the order in which the pages appear will be different for everybody. So this is why Googling yourself is a lot of fun, but is ultimately pointless, because Google knows you're Googling yourself because it knows what your name is. So it's like, well, we better show John a picture of himself, haven't we? Because if John Paul doesn't find a picture of himself, he's going to be sad for the rest of the day. So we're probably going to find John Paul in our image search and pop him at the top. Then John Paul has a nice warm feeling inside and can go about his day or his weekend being happy. However, if Gemma looks up John Paul, it might be like, well, John Paul who? Never heard of him. You know, and it's going to get a completely different result. So there are some tools out there which can help you work out where you rank, and they're very expensive. And the reason they're very expensive is because they have to compile their own database of all the Google rankings, and it costs a lot of money. So I personally don't think it's really worthwhile. What I would say is if you're ever over at a friend's house, or you are at a client's office or something, John Paul's just said when he Googles his name, he gets the Pope, which is fair enough. That's probably the most relevant. What about John Paul Pope Coach? Get a friend or a colleague or a client to do the search that you want. Obviously not Jean Paul, but like get your client to Google coaches marketing training and just see what comes up. That's the only way you're going to be able to do it. I wish it was easier, but it really isn't. You can go into incognito. You can use other browsers, but the thing is Google still knows it's you because it knows your IP address. It may or may not be using fingerprinting, which is a shadowy practice that we won't go into, but it knows what device you're on. It's using a number of factors of data collection which are dubious in their legality, but it does use them to identify people in incognito, and will still be influencing your results. That's just the way it is. If you really, really want to go for it, I'd recommend downloading a browser called Brave, and only use it, like don't log into Google and just use it for checking, or switch to using Brave and then only use Firefox or Safari. But I have one browser on my computer, which for me is Safari, and I only use it for checking listings. And I never log into Google on it. So it tries to give me a bit of a sort of more realistic reflection of where we actually are. So rankings and organic, here we go. So what I've shown you so far is the organic listings. Now, organic listings are just what Google finds in its database. They're what Google finds in its web of most relevant things for you. However, some clever person at Google, and I forget the person's name, said, well, hang on a minute, what if we sold these slots here in an auction? What if we said, well, you can be number 1 or number 2? So if I type in podcast editing for life coaches, Mark may be at number 1 because he's written the best page on the internet about podcasting for life coaches. Well done, Mark. So Mark is getting all the lovely number 3 traffic for £0. However, I work at Spotify and I'm not happy about this. So I've decided I'm going to bid on that word. And every time someone types it in, I'm going to pay to be number 1. So what Google does is it conducts an auction. So when you type that in, it goes out to all of the people who want to advertise and says, hey, does anybody want to bid on this word? I've got a hot user right here. People then, you don't actually bid, the robot does it for you. It then conducts a real-time auction, finds the highest bidder, and they then display here and here. You will also see adverts down the side. You'll see them at the bottom. If you're on mobile, they also interject them in the results as you go. It's not just restricted to search. You'll also see it in Gmail. You'll also see it on Maps. You never see it in Docs, which is nice yet. But Maps is a really good one. Like if you're running a shop, you can do some amazing stuff with Maps. Like the plumbers thing I was telling you about. So these clicks, these are ads. So this is called paid traffic. And that is essentially pay to play. If you want to get involved in it, you can get involved in it. I wouldn't recommend it. To make Google Ads work, you need a starting budget of at least 1,500 quid a month. Less than that, not worth it. Google will happily take less than that and call you up once a month to explain why it hasn't worked and why you should keep giving them the money, but it never will work. We've been doing it for 10 years. Unless you're spending about 1,500, £2,000 minimum, it's not going to work. And you pay per click. So if it might give you, like you don't pay for impressions, you only pay if someone clicks it, but let's not get into ads. That's the difference between paid traffic and organic traffic. So the aim with SEO is to be number 1, 2, or 3. Essentially anywhere on the first page is enough with SEO because it's free. It's not costing you any money. And it's really annoying the people who are paying because they're paying to be ahead of you. The best place to hide something on the internet is page 2 of Google. So if you're anything below page 2, no one has ever seen it. No one ever will see it. It's just the reality of it. So how do you get onto page 1? Be more specific, be more useful, add an image, link it to something, quote someone, make sure you've got your H1, your H2, check the page speed. Is there some silly little bit of code at the bottom that's slowing it down? Have you accidentally uploaded a 50 meg JPEG? just have a look at that page. You can put that page into GT metrics and it will look at that page. When you just put in your home page, it's just looking at a home page. You can put in any page you want. But essentially the aim of SEO in the, if we're going to think about what the point of it all is to get your website to appear on this magical first page. And the key to that is being as specific and useful and helpful as possible. And that's basically as much as you can do without really starting to spend money on either building out a strategy for SEO, which is quite an expensive thing to do because you have to start investing in some of this software or hire an agency or a freelancer who has access to that software. And as a coach starting out, it's not worth it. If you're trying to build or scale your business, it could be a really good alternative to ads. Again, I'd be happy to discuss that with any specific use cases with people because it is really case by case. But in general, my advice is always spend time making useful, relevant, interesting content and just keep making it. And Google will eventually just get to know that you always talk about, podcasting for coaches, movement, voice coaching with Kieran. The more content Kieran puts out about voice coaching, it just gets to know that when Kieran and Join the Dialogue appear, it's to do with voice coaching. The more pages you can give it, the more context Google has. So I think we've covered search volume, website speed, titles, keywords, rankings, organics, and paid. Does anybody got any questions? I realize that was an enormous amount of information to give out in 53 minutes. But yes, Gemma.
This one actually is a little bit going back to John Paul's plugin question. So a little bit of, I guess, an oxymoron is a plugin that actually does slow my website down quite a lot is Yoast, which is an SEO plugin, for those who don't know it. And they basically analyze the page and then say how I can make it quicker. But then it's all like, it does tell me about keywords and things, but then that sounds quite dated now. So I could nearly turn that plugin off.
So I would be wary if you've got either Rank Math or Yoast SEO installed. If you turn it off, it's actually really bad for your SEO because it's running a whole load of nerdy stuff. It's running a whole load of nerdy stuff in the background, which I won't get into because it will just bore everyone to tears. It's running your sitemaps. It's doing your page architecture. It's running all of the stuff that nobody cares about on websites. If you've had that website installed all the time, it's built all that up. So if you turn it off, it disappears. And then Google's like, whoa, where did that website go? Forget about it. And it will destroy. So just leave it on. It's probably not slowing it down that much. If you're finding that Yoast is slowing it down, how do you know Yoast is slowing it down?
Oh, I don't. I was just thinking, well, before I switched hosts, it was faster. And then whenever I put Yoast in, then it was grumpy with me for a while in terms of I got slower. So what you need to do is add caching on top. That'll help. Again, I can help people understand what caching is with a little bit more detail, but adding a caching plugin, your new host has caching, so it should be faster and it will get faster. You just need more traffic to get to the site to make it faster, unfortunately, with caching. But yes, I wouldn't, if you've got Yoast or Rank Math installed, then don't just turn it off. Let me know and I'll have a look because it's probably something else that's slow in reality. There is a Rank Math maker plugin. I'll put this in the chat. This is an SEO analyzer, and I haven't put this in the chat up till now, mainly because, again, this is one of those things where it does give you a whole load of nerdy information, which might just baffle you. It might make it all a bit. I don't want to make it seem daunting. If, however, you love a bit of nerdy info like Mark there, this is good stuff. So, for example, if you search your site, I just searched our site, it gives you common keywords.
Now, this is a really good indicator to what Google thinks your site is about. So when I did Better, Bolder, Braver, the keywords are marketing, coaches, community, work, better, braver, bolder, clients, coaching, and feel. I'll take that. That's not bad. If, however, it said Christmas trees, used cars, dog food, coaching, I'd be like, I need to have a think about what my content's about here. Am I keeping to the point? Running that on blog posts is really interesting. Does Google think your blog post? Does Google think your blog post is about what you wrote it about? Or have you gone off on another tangent and explained about chasing rabbits around a field, and it suddenly put you in a, weird category about rabbits rather than whatever you're writing about? It gives you what your H1 and your H2s are, so you can check whether your page is loading correctly. If you're watching on repeat, the link will be underneath the video. It tells you what your alt image tags are, which is saying, what does Google think your images are about if it can't see your images? Crucially, what do text readers say your image is about for people who can't see your images? It gives you, anyway, the amount of information this gives you goes on and on. It gives you what it's going to look like on Google. It shows you what it's going to look like on mobile. It just gives you loads of stuff. If you're getting any red flags, there are little things that it gives you tips to make it better. But like, for example, if you do Better, Bolder, Braver, it comes up and it says, like, some of your CSS files do not seem to be minified. Now, I know what that means, and it's ultimately completely pointless and useless, and I know I can ignore that. But if you get lots of red dots, you might be looking at it going, oh no, everything's broken. It doesn't necessarily mean everything's broken. Don't panic. Some things, easy fixes. Some things you're just like, I could nudge that and it's going to make no difference. That's what having quite a lot of experience in looking at this sort of stuff teaches you. So again, please do get in touch if you run any of these tests that I've given you and it's just red and it's like, ping me a link and we'll get you sorted. Wonderful. Any other questions before we finish up? Mark.
Hello. I have one on domain authority. It's a little bit maybe old school web stuff.
That's
like
really
on
nice.
the sort of, sure, original stuff we were talking about right at the beginning. But I feel like that's still important.
It is.
So, and I'll let you explain what all that is.
So another factor that Google uses here is what's called domain authority. So Google don't call it domain authority because domain authority is actually a phrase, I believe, by Neil Patel, who used to work at Google and then made millions telling people what he'd learned at Google. It's all a bit magic beans for me, but keep making the videos now. Essentially, do you remember our spider web? So if your page is here, that's you. And then we've got the Financial Times over here. We've got BBC. We've got Coaches Are Us. The coaching, I don't know, like a coaching directory. If your website links out to these, that's saying to Google, oh, okay, this person wants to be associated with this kind of content. That's giving me a bit of a flavor for the page. If, however, the link goes back, it's telling Google this website trusts this website. So I trust the FT, I trust the BBC, I trust this coaching directory. If the link goes back, then the trust is mutual. It's a really strong bond. The more of these mutual links you can get, the more trusted your website is, and the score that is attributed to that is called domain authority. So when your website has no links, it has a score of 0 because you don't trust anybody and nobody trusts you. So that's why linking out is a good idea, because you're saying, I trust these people. When people link to you, it's telling Google that they trust you. So that's good. However, some websites are more powerful than other websites. So Google knows that the BBC is on the whole, an incredibly trustworthy source of information and knowledge. And it's incredibly hard to get a link on the BBC. So if the BBC links to your website, you are going to go up massively, like huge amounts of domain authority. If you can get any of the big broadsheet newspapers, I hasten to add broadsheet newspapers to link to you, you're going to go up. If you get one of the red tops and or the Daily Mail linking to you, that is not necessarily going to have the effect that you think it's going to have. It puts your website in a very different category of website, and it's not necessarily favorable. That's all I'm going to say on it for libel reasons. Coaching directories, again, they're really good. If you can get a listing that points back and forth, it's really worthwhile. Now, here comes the tyranny of the nerd. Basically, a load of web developers a while ago realized that directories were really, really powerful for SEO. So they started making directories and they said, hey, Mark, you're a coach. Would you like a free listing on our website? Mark's like, yes, I'd love to be listed on your website. So puts his information in. However, the link they put on does not go back. Unless, of course, Mark would like to upgrade to the paid subscription for the directory, at which point that link goes back. Essentially, I know quite a few people who run agencies, and the people who are currently sitting on a yacht in the Bahamas are the people who own directories. Like there is a global plastics manufacturer directory. Now, that's boring as anything, right? But it is 250 quid a year for a backlink. But just that backlink will get you on page 1 of Google just through domain authority. So how many plastic manufacturers do you think globally are on that? All of them. And they are raking it in. So domain authority is still really important, but it isn't something you can necessarily just buy. It is something that needs to be earned. So for example, one of my clients is a prolific author. He's written 7 books. His website is almost 10,000 blogs. He's almost up with Seth Godin. But he's got links from the Times, the Telegraph, from BBC, from Nat Geo, from Discovery Channel, from all of these huge companies and domains. And his domain authority is one of the best I've ever seen for a single operator website. It's unbelievable. And his website always comes up. If you type in how to navigate by the sun, #1. If you type in which way am I looking, #1, because he's got the answer to that question. It's niche content. It's really trusted. And he's got, amazing backlinks, which he just got by writing and being interesting. Jean-Paul.
What I suspect things though where it goes, because as Google gets more personalized data, it's what might be more relevant is who the people you know are relevant to, or what websites you visit.
Yes.
It may become less about those remote authorities and directories that people aren't using, but more about who do your friends link to, who's linking to locally.
Yes, and there is definitely an element of that we see. It's commonly, you see it more in ads than you do in search results. For example, if you went to a restaurant or someone you know who you have spent considerable amounts of time with went to a restaurant and you Google that restaurant, it will come up with a maps link at the top. So for example, let's say me and you sit in the pub for a few hours and then I go home and I Google a restaurant you've been to, it will come up the top. Because Google know we sat next to each other and we spent time together and I'm searching for a place that you've been. So that will definitely happen unofficially. You'll also see this with ads, and this is this whole amazing conspiracy theory of my phone is listening to me. It's not listening to you, it just knows who you've been with. So for example, Gemma may have been Googling train travel in Austria, having just been to Austria, for example. Now, let's say I go for a meal with Gemma and we sit together and our phones are next to each other. We're pinging the same Wi-Fi, our Bluetooths ping each other. Google knows our phones have been next to each other. So if I go home, it might be like, what are the chances that Simon and Gemma spoke about Austria? Quite likely. Let's try it with an ad. Don't just show me an ad about tourism Austria, see what happens. And I'll be like, listen to our conversation about Austria. It just knows where you are. It knows who you're with. It knows who you spend time with. It knows everything. So there's no, it's not as clever as, it doesn't need to be as clever as voice matching because it knows who you spend time with. But that's not like official Google guidance, by the way. That's not anything they would ever admit to. But yes, so this is definitely where we get into rant territory. Basically, next time we all have some beers, we can really get into the actual real surveillance nuts and bolts of how it works, the terrifying underbelly of how Google really knows what you are interested in. And there's some amazing stuff out there that's all happening. But yeah, if anybody's got any other questions they want, let's grab a beer, virtual or otherwise, at some point, and we'll really have at it. Any other questions before we close off? I realise we have run over, which I knew we were going to do on this one because it's a big topic. Oh, of course. How do you pronounce your name? Is it Anne? Ain? I really apologise if that's horrendously wrong.
No, it's fine. It's actually pronounced Anya, but
Anya.
There's no way you could guess that from the way that it's spelled.
Anya. Well, thank you for your question, Anya. I use other search engines instead of Google. Of course, I've completely forgotten that entire bit. Right. So, believe it or not, there are other ways to search the internet. Nobody knows about this. And that's because the word for search is Google. You just Google something, right? It's like Hoover being the word for vacuum cleaner. It's just ubiquitous. So there are a number of other companies that search the web, and basically they have their own spiders that go out and crawl the internet, and they make their own database. One of those companies is called Bing, which is Microsoft, and they have about 8% of global search, which is a lot. It used to be about 2%, but it's about 8%. Now, the way that Microsoft have expanded that is to force Bing to be the search engine in Windows. So if you click on the little search icon in Windows, Mac friends won't know about this, but if you click on the little search icon on Windows, the results you get, it opens Microsoft Edge and shows you the results in Bing. So if I work for one of the big five, your KPMGs, your EYs, who can't change all this stuff. If you work for GSK, if you work for EY, whatever, one of the big mega companies, you don't get to choose where your search engine is. You just get whatever Windows throws at you. So Bing can be a really good way of getting to those corporate clients. And that's where Bing ads, which are dirt cheap, like Bing ads you can run for a couple £100 a month, and you'll get corporate clients with those because they're locked in. They can only use Bing. So Bing have seen an opportunity to expand their search. And what they do is they offer the search results, but as data. So when I type into Google, I get it rendered as Google in a web page that I can understand. With Bing, I can use a robot to send the request to Bing and say, hey, give me what you've got. And it sends me data back. If I was to then create a company called, let's say, DuckDuckGo, Ecosia, one of the many other search engines, all they're doing is taking what you type in, throwing it at Bing, and bringing it back, and then displaying it as their own search results. So what you'll see in DuckDuckGo or in Ecosia, just of the two that come to mind, are Bing search results. All they've done is strip the ads off the top, and for doing that, they pay a small price. So Bing is the other big search engine. Microsoft advertising tells us that in blind test results, people can't tell the difference. I'll let you be the judge of it. It's obviously for most search terms, it's going to be just as good. For some other funky stuff that Google does, like it does maths, you can type maths problems into Google. I don't know if you know that, and it solves them for you. You can type, it does all this other funky stuff. Bing doesn't do quite as much of that yet, but for just general search, it is very good. So Ecosia
is a really great search engine, not only because they are planting trees, but because those results you're getting are very good search results. So it's definitely worth checking where you come up in some of those other search results, especially if that's where you think your clients might be. So if you think your clients are the kind of people who might use Ecosia or DuckDuckGo, give it a go, see where you come up. Again, there's no real way of gaming it, but if you've got your page with all your titles and your images aren't too big, it's fast to load, all of the things we've been through in this session, you're giving it the best chance. There are ways you can kind of submit your page and all this sort of stuff, but I'll be honest, the bots find it. It's not, unless you've got an enormously complicated site, the bots are going to find the spiders are going to find it. Even if you don't want them to, they'll still find it. They're very good at, weeveling out. So has that answered your question, Anya, or have I answered all around it? Wonderful stuff. Wonderful. Well, if you think of any other SEO questions, or you find an absolutely hilarious service that you think is just promising the moon on a stick, I would love to know about it. I always love finding hilarious SEO stuff. Please do share. If you find another tool that you think is really useful that I haven't found, again, please share it. I will happily look at it and post it in the feed and recommend it if it is a good one. There's a lot out there. It's hard to know. I only have my little pool of tools that I use, but if you find one and it's giving you useful information, do share it. Love to hear about it. As always, you can comment under the video and I will answer questions, or as always, the invitation is there. As I said, if you have done your SEO report and it's all red and the lights are flashing and you're panicking, please do get in touch. I can probably point you in the right direction of a couple of quick fixes, or we can jump on a one-to-one and actually get it fixed. And I think that is probably all of SEO for coaches.